Hello, I think we're going to get started shortly. We're going to have our dear professor, Chris Freeman, begin with a slight introduction. Give him a round of applause.
Well, welcome. It's been a long time since we put this old theater to public use. You may find this hard to believe, but this is what democracy looked like when it was first invented by the Greeks. We often talk about democracy as being demos kratos, or people power, but the demes are the root of the way in which that kind of community came together. The Greeks voted in groups. Democracy is a way in which we could see people, sitting next to people and hearing dialogue and engaging in a civil discussion that raises our aspirations to something greater than any one of us could have done by ourselves. When the Greeks came to vote, they vote by their demes. They voted by their neighborhood. They voted by their community. And the places where they voted, you might not believe this, but they were theaters. And that's why they called them deme theaters, because that's where the demesmen went. And they gathered. And their voter turnouts did better than we did. Do you know that? So we're hoping to put our little slice of western Wisconsin back on the map. And we're looking to make candidates part of a discussion that UW Stout wants to be part of, to promote a different type of dialogue, a dialogue between human beings who've got mutual values and ideas for how we can raise each other up in a time where politics seems to be beating us down. All right. So I'm really just an instrument here. I'm the advisor to the Stout Students Unite group that really put this event on. And they've been putting pro-democracy events on for years. But I think now things are finally come together where we're seeing the fruits of our labors. And it feels really good to have you all here tonight. At a time in the semester when people are sort of desperate, this type of mutual aid that we're all bringing each other feels like a nice place to be. So that's all I have to tell you about a little lecture about democracy and deme theaters and putting Harvey Hall back into action. But we hope to see this hall and these people, our demesmen, as a vital part of democratization or re-democratization for our little town and our school and our community. Without further ado, I give you Stout Students Unite.
Hello there. Okay. We are a activist organization on campus. This is my lovely president, Simon Brown. I'm Nina. Nice to meet you all. We're very happy to be able to be a part of this tonight. We always do this when we're doing an event. We like to do our land acknowledgement. Which was written by our lovely professor, Jim Hanley. So thank you. Well, given to me then. We recognize and respect the inherent sovereignty of the first 12 nations that reside in the boundaries of the state of Wisconsin. They are the traditional custodians of this land. We acknowledge the circumstances that led to their forced removal and honor their history of resistance and resilience. The First Nations residing in the boundaries of present-day Wisconsin remain vibrant and strong. And yeah.
And a little bit more about SSU. We are kind of our social justice group on campus. We have some wonderful members here today. And we're putting in the work. You guys might have seen our Peace March last month. But we have some thank yous before we begin. So on behalf of SSU, we'd like to thank our candidates for being here. Unfortunately, Derek Van Orten could not come, and Becca Cook is sick today. But thank you again for coming. The University of Wisconsin Stout and all of our attendees for coming to our campus-wide voter event. This is the first time we've hosted a forum like this in Harvey Hall, and it is being live streamed, which is very exciting. You'll be able to see the recording of the event on wis.community. And a big shout out to Steve Hansen for managing the tech tonight and the UW Stout tech staff. We also want to thank the Dunn County League of Women Voters for making this possible, giving us guidance, and providing a great model for nonviolent communication. We do have some general rules for our voter event tonight as adapted from the League protocols. Those are presentations and questions should be confined to issues, not personal attacks. Substitutes or spokesperson for candidates will not be permitted. Candidates who accept invitations may appear, even if all candidates cannot attend. The order of speaking for opening statements will be determined randomly. The closing statements will be given in the reverse order, and exceptions will be made if a candidate has a previous commitment and notifies us in advance, which I don't think has happened, so super cool. And then each candidate will receive equal time for an opening statement, which will be 5 minutes. This will be followed by a quick Q&A period from the audience, 2 minutes per answer. We do have some note cards, so you guys don't have to keep super hard track of your time. We'll keep track of that for you. And we'll conclude with brief closing statements up to 5 minutes. And we'll also have our runners, Jack and Sean, if you want to raise your hands, walking around collecting audience questions. You guys might have grabbed some of those note cards from the front. They'll bring those up to us in between questions. So if you do have a question and you don't have a note card, you can run right back to that table and grab one and write them for Jack or Sean. But I think that's all we had. Again, thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll bring our candidates up.
Check these mics. Okay. Check.
Thank you.
There we go. Oh, there you go. Okay. Now, how do I turn it off? Should I turn it off? Should I, if I'm not speaking, is it okay to leave it there? Yeah, go ahead and leave it there.
Hello? Okay. So we have Mark Newman, Brad Pfaff, and Deb McCraft here today. For introductions, I think we could probably just go straight down the line. So starting with Mark.
Oh, okay. Well, oh, there we go. You have to adjust to the mic, you know. Is it this far or this far? Here we go. Thank you all for coming to this event. I love that introduction. That was wonderful, Chris. This is really where we do it. We make democracy happen. So tonight we want to talk about what's important to us and what's important to our governance as a self-governing people. The first thing that I think is important when I'm looking at a candidate is I want to know something about them. Ultimately it comes down to I feel like I can trust the person, but it kind of starts with, well, who are they? So I have to solve that problem for you here. I was born in Quincy, Illinois. It's a little bit downriver on the Mississippi. A small town not unlike La Crosse, where I live now. And I grew up there in a Catholic community where I was able to meet Franciscans who served in my parish as priests and brothers. They made a big impression on me. These people living in fraternity, in service, without personal ownership. That caused me to want to join that life, which I was able to do after college. And one thing led to another as I was being introduced into the Franciscan community that ultimately allowed me to practice medicine in a country called Zaire at the time. And I was able to do that from the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s. That was quite an experience, but I have to tell you, in the end, I kind of got my ass kicked. Uh-oh. And I mean that in the sense more of a moral way than a physical way, because I went there with this notion that I could do some good, help some poor people, maybe a little bit of that. And I learned that I really had a lot to learn, and I learned much from my African neighbors that helped me to step forward in my life, allowing me to return to the United States with a much more simple idea of what it is to live a full human life. And I met my wife and moved to Madison, Wisconsin, where she was living. That's how I married into Wisconsin, and I like to say it that way. And after about not too long after our marriage, it was a few years, our son was born, and then in 2010, I was able to move to La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I practiced pediatric critical care until 2019. So that's kind of the bio part. Now the why part is on 2017, we all remember that a new president was elected, and he gave his inaugural address that made a big impression on me. I did not like the description that he made of my country being an American carnage. And it caused me to, for a moment, open my eyes and say, there's something going on in my country that I can't just sit back and not participate in. I have to learn how to become a politician. You know, it was hard to say it, but that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn how to be a servant in our political arena, like the Franciscans were servants when I was a child. And so it's been 5 years of learning how to do that. And I've been engaged in electoral politics, and I've been engaged in issue politics, and I find that they sort of feed each other. And in the end, I was able also to be elected to office in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I serve on the Common Council now. Learned a lot about what it means to be a legislator. And now I'm happy to be here on this evening in this electoral process that we're all engaged in, because we do it together. It's the candidates and all of us citizens together that make elections and the electoral process work. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, UW Stout. My name is Brad Paff. I am a candidate for Congress here in West Central Wisconsin, the 3rd Congressional District seat. I'm going to share something with you tonight that you wouldn't hear if you turned on cable news. And quite frankly, if you lived in New York City right now, or Los Angeles, or Washington, D.C., you'd probably choke on your oat juice after hearing me say this. But you know what? We're here at Stout, so I think we can handle it. Rural America is just as important as anywhere else. That's right, it is. And quite frankly, if you ask me, it's even more important. And I will tell you why. I'm from rural Wisconsin. My family's been farming in northern La Crosse County since they came to this country in the 1800s. I met my beautiful wife, Betty, at a 4-H leadership luncheon. We raised our 2 children in northern La Crosse County. You know, growing up on a farm may not always be the most attractive thing to some people. You know, milking cows and feeding calves, you know, it's not the most current thing on TikTok. But you do learn a thing or two. For one, you learn about humility. There's nothing more humbling than slip sliding after you stepped in a fresh pile of cow manure. That'll get your attention. But you know what? When you grow up on a farm, you learn about dedication. You learn about hard work. You learn about resilience. You tend to things. You help things grow. And you know what? It didn't matter if you hit the game-winning home run the night before in a conference baseball game, or if you aced your chemistry test. You knew when you got home, you'd have to milk the cows. That takes dedication. But the other thing about rural America is this. When things go wrong, and we all know at times things will go wrong, you don't just pass the buck. You don't blame someone else. You see, it didn't matter who let the gate down. What mattered is the cows got out, and you got to get them in. That's what we do in rural America. I've spent most of my adult life working for the people of rural Wisconsin. I worked with U.S. Congressman Ron Kind and U.S. Senator Herb Kohl on agriculture policy. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've endorsed my candidacy for Congress. I spent 8 years in the Obama administration at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But I will tell you, the highlight of my professional career was in December of 2018 when I got a phone call from Governor-elect Tony Evers asking me to serve as his Secretary of Agriculture for the state of Wisconsin. I absolutely loved that job. Loved it. I traveled this state, I listened and I learned, and I heard from our family farmers who every single day struggle to make ends meet. And when those partisan politicians in Madison told me that they had heard enough about what was going on our farms, well, I continued to speak up. When they told me to sit down, I stood up. And then they turned around and they voted me down. They did not confirm me as Secretary of Agriculture because I spoke for our farmers. Well, you know what? The people in western Wisconsin turned around and voted me in to the state Senate because they wanted me to join them in holding these politicians accountable. Now, I want to talk about accountability. I want to talk about Derek Von Orden. He was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, that awful, deadly day. He pits neighbor against neighbor. He verbally attacked a teenage librarian aide in Prairie du Chien over a book display. We can't have someone like that representing this area in Congress. Because if you ask me, the least patriotic thing someone can do is to go after our nation's principles. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I look forward to this debate.
Well, I'm Deb McGrath, Deb Baldus McGrath, and I'm running for Congress in Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District, and I'm from Menominee. And Menominee who's made me who I am. So my mom is Lolly Baldus, and she was a teacher right here at Stout. My father was Al Baldus, who was a farmer and then legislator and a congressman for this district. And they taught us, family of 6 kids, to listen. And we also learned that service was the highest responsibility and privilege in this community. I didn't have money for college, but the military did, and I took my father's example and joined the Army. And my father said, take those tough jobs because no one will fight them for you, and you will gain leadership experience, especially as a woman. So I put my hand up, and at airborne school on the first day, before morning light, I saw my fellow soldiers, left, right, many of them falling out of the difficult runs and drills. And by sunup, I was the only woman left of the 140 soldiers. The sergeants would have loved to have made me quit. I was spit on in runs. I did extra push-ups while others waited for chow. But I wouldn't give up, because that's not what someone from Menominee does. And on the day of the first jump, they put me first in line to lead. I stood in the door of that plane and I jumped. And as I saw the tail of the plane leave me, I knew that leadership took courage and risk. And I hit the ground running with a dedication and a conviction that has never left me and that I bring to this race. I went on to serve in the 2nd Infantry Division on the demilitarized zone, same unit that my father had fought in during the war. My husband and I got married there in a small chapel with just a few fellow soldiers around us. When we found out we were having a family, like many other families, one of us stayed to serve and one of us became a proud military spouse and parent. We serve and we sacrifice too. After 9/11, my husband's a Special Forces Army Ranger. He was posted on the border of Afghanistan, and I brought my kids to the safest place I knew. We were at home, right here in our log cabin. Shortly after that, I was recruited to work at the CIA in an undercover role, and I put my hand up for its toughest assignments and challenges again. I served in war zones, hardship zones. I saw tyranny, and I fought terrorism. Upon my retirement, I was awarded its Career Commendation Medal for courage and mission accomplishment in global operations. All the while, I saw what was happening here in Wisconsin, and particularly during the last administration and during COVID. I saw farms closing, businesses shuttered, divisiveness in our communities and in our families. And then on January 6th of 2020, to my shock, people storming our Capitol building like I had seen overseas, and that the Republican opponent in this race, a veteran who had taken the same oath that I had to protect and defend the Constitution, was there. This was a call of service for me. The stakes of this election are high. Derek Van Orden is a conspiracy theorist. He's an insurrectionist. He will not defend our rights, nor will he defend our electoral system. And he almost won. I have 25 years of serving our country, and I have proven leadership in solving problems at the federal level by working together of people of all different types and listening to others in crisis situations. I'm a wife and a mother, and I understand the challenges that are facing our families. Our families deserve affordable and accessible health care, especially in the rural areas, and telehealth. They deserve good public schools. They deserve lower prescription drug prices. And our economy depends on infrastructure build-out and good-paying jobs. And our strength of our nation will depend on all of this, cybersecurity and the protection of our planet. I'm Deb Baldus McGrath. I'll never stop fighting for you, for our families, our economy, and the strength of our nation. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. So we're going to have our runners go around. If anyone has a card, just kind of raise your hand with it, and they'll come grab it from you. We also want to remind, oh, that's crazy. We want to remind the candidates not to attack other candidates, and then ask the audience to hold the applause until the closing statements. So our first question is,
why should students who come from different states and different regions care about politics in Wisconsin's 3rd District? And we can definitely start with Mark.
Students coming from other states into Wisconsin, why would they be interested in what's happening in the 3rd District? I think it's because it's where we're at. Wherever we find ourselves is where we engage. When you think about what it means to be a self-governing nation, it means opening our eyes and seeing what's happening around us and deciding that I, as a member of this society, as a citizen in this country, in this community, have my part to play. The highest office in a democracy is the office of the private citizen. And so if I come from another state, it's not because I can see that there might be some interest or lack of interest for me in Western Wisconsin, but rather this is where I am, and this is where I have the chance to serve in this tradition of self-governance that we've inherited from 250 years. We've certainly had some rough spots, and some would say that today is another example of a rough spot as we try to live out and pass on our heritage. But in spite of it all, underneath are these values of freedom and fairness that we hear about in our Declaration of Independence, that we heard about in Abraham Lincoln's speech at Gettysburg, and it's those same values that we have inherited, that I know I do. I want to be sure that I can pass them on to those who will follow. I want my son to receive this democratic tradition the way I was so proud to receive it from my father. And I think that's the essential answer. Thanks. I got the time's up. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I'd encourage anyone from any state to come visit Wisconsin and live here and invest here. The thing is this, is in order to do that, we need to make sure that we continue to keep higher education accessible. We need to keep it affordable. I mean, right now, higher education is too expensive. It costs too much. And the thing is, we have to do a better job of making sure that people have opportunity for a higher education. I'm first generation off the farm. I had the opportunity to get a 4-year degree through the University of Wisconsin system. I'm very proud of that. I will continue to work to try and make college as affordable as it possibly can do, as possible as we can do. We have to be able to do that. We have to make sure that we can move people through college in a timely basis. We need to create greater apprenticeship and mentorship opportunities. We need to be able to link employers with students to provide opportunity. And we need to make sure that we keep our communities safe and healthy and diversified so people want to stay in these communities and raise their families here and be part of our larger community. But I would encourage anybody, may it be here from Wisconsin or around the country, come to Wisconsin, be part of this. This is great. Thank you.
When I think about being a student here in Menominee, what a privilege it is to be able to go to Stout and to be around a diverse group of people who have different ideas. And I hear the question, why would I get involved in politics here? My mom told a great story just when we walked in. She said she was teaching across the hall, and they said, oh, there's somebody you should see. Come to see Hubert Humphrey is sitting right here in this auditorium 45 years ago. That is why we all need to be involved in politics, because each one of us serves. Each one of us is going to make a difference in this community, and we need to be able to listen to each other. And that's what I learned. When I talk about why this race is important to somebody who's not in this district, I say because so goes Wisconsin, so goes the rest of this nation. We feed and equip the nation and the world. What happens here will determine the majority of the House of Representatives, but even more so, we are the moral heartbeat of what has been happening in politics. People care about what happens in Wisconsin. We pulled Biden across the line. It matters. The who and what you do matters. We care. That is what this community is about. That's what this district is about. And that we will show the rest of the nation that we stand up and we will make sure that this democracy lives.
I want to remind you all to suspend your applause until the concluding statements, but everyone up here is saying some great stuff, so it's hard not to clap. Next question.
All right, thank you for that. So now we're going to be doing some questions from the audience, and the first one I have is, we all know there are many problems that need to be fixed. What really sets you apart as someone who can actually solve these problems? And I would like Deb to go first. If you can, thank you.
I have 25 years of working at the federal level in jobs from the smallest to the executive level and working together to get things done. When we look at the importance of this race, let's not forget who Derek Van Orden is. Again, he almost won. This is someone who will not respect our rights. He has tried to tear down our electoral system. One of us on this stage, and we have pledged to all work together, and because we are friends, one of us will have to stand up to Derek Van Orden, and he is a bully. We will have to stand up, I will stand up, with reason, with truth, and logic. I will go toe-to-toe with anyone who tries to incite fear to get people to back down. I have been standing up for our nation in its toughest locations, and I have made sure that my countrymen were safe and that our nation was safe. And that all the while that we could feed and equip the nation, that we could make sure that our farms and businesses could have the best sustainable and innovative practices. I will never stop fighting, and I have a lifetime behind me to prove it.
Well, I've traveled this district from north to south, from east to west. I know the people and I know the communities of this district. Western Wisconsin people are hardworking, we're honest, we're resilient, we're dedicated, and we know the difference between right and wrong. We know that just because your preferred presidential candidate did not get a majority of the votes, you don't go to Washington, D.C. and participate in an insurrection. We know that when our neighbors are hurting, we step forward and we provide assistance. We know in order to make our community a better place, that we go to work. We participate to make this community strong. We know that. That's why this race is important. That's why we need to make sure that we come together, that in November, we win this race. I have a history of working for the people of this district and the people of this state. I've stood in dairy barns, cheese plants. I've stood in feed mills. I've sat at kitchen tables with individuals as they've talked about the high cost of health care. They've talked about the hope and dreams for their children. And I've also heard when they worry that they can't make the mortgage payment and they may lose the family farm, a farm that's been in the family for generations upon generations. That's the kind of background, that's the kind of understanding that the people of this congressional district are looking for in their federal representative. And I look forward to the opportunity to continue to travel this district and to learn over the next few months. Thank you.
Anita, I think I understood the question as there are many problems and what would qualify me to be able to solve them. And my first answer is, well, I can't solve them. But I do know that there are a lot of problems, and I do know that the important thing is to be able to recognize those problems, not as myself, but as a together, as a we. That it's important for the community to identify the problems that are important to all of us. And then the solution, I believe, comes from the we, all of us together. And if anything would qualify me in that regard, it would be that I have had in my own character a tendency to, I call it, and because of my physician background, an anaphylactic reaction to us against them. So I even put an ism on it. I call it us against them-ism, like it's a disease. Well, it is. It is a disease, and it destroys our ability. It's like a cancer at our heart. When we try to govern ourselves in community, when we identify what's important, and then we want to find solutions, we have to be able to get beyond us against those others, othering them. It's like a cancer tearing us down. And then, once we get to that stage, I believe that the next step is to be able to hear all of the inputs from the different perspectives. And even if the solution is not the one that I thought was going to be best, if we were able to receive these into deliberation and conversation, and we take a vote, and somebody wins, or one idea wins, you know what? It's going to be okay.
Oh, okay. Our next audience question, actually before that, we want to remind you guys to please refrain from attacking other candidates who are not here. But the next question that we have from the audience is, how important do you see voting by mail to be for voter turnout? And what would be your initiative for voter mobilization, especially student mobilization? And this time we'll go Brad, Deb, Mark.
I'm sorry, could you
Yeah, for sure. Sorry. It's kind of a long question. How important do you see voting by mail to be for voter turnout? And then what would your initiative be for voter mobilization, especially for students?
I
And then again, we'll do Brad, Deb, and then Mark. Mix it around.
Thank you very much for that question. Many of you are aware of the charade that's taking place right now in the Wisconsin State Capitol, where a former state Supreme Court justice is using your tax dollars and my tax dollars to try and disenfranchise voters. That's wrong. I serve in the state Senate. I have voted time and time again against those bills that have been brought forward in order to disenfranchise voters. I think it's wrong what the majority party in the legislature has been doing over the last few years. And I think for a democracy to continue to function and grow, we need to encourage people to come forward, to participate in this process. But instead, that's not what's happening right now. So I will say this, is that I do believe that we do need to make sure that we keep our elections safe and secure. And you can do that without disenfranchising the electorate. But that's not the narrative you hear right now in Madison. I encourage us to continue to reach out to our friends and our neighbors and those in our community, encourage them to get involved in the democratic process, to learn about the issues that are taking place, and to recognize what's happening within our communities. That's the kind of campaign that I am running. That's the kind of person that I am. I think we learn from one another, and the best way we can do that is encourage people to be part of this process.
The right to vote is sacred. It is the most important part of our democracy, and every single person deserves the right to vote, and they deserve to not be harassed, and they deserve to be able to do it without having to skip a day of work or be somehow discriminated against by having to take time or to line up for it. And I voted by absentee because of my service and how important it was for me to sometimes get in that ballot a month early. But I did it, even if I had to do the write-in ballot, because it was that important to me. And many of the places that I was serving in, people risked their lives to vote. So I will always, the John Lewis Voting Act, of course, I would, if in Congress, I would vote for that. I want to make sure that we look at this in a federal level, but that it is also very important in the state and local level. And the April elections were particularly heartening to me. Look what happened here and in other counties across the 3rd District. They actually increased voter turnout, and we brought home we stood up to people who were trying to bully us out of voting, bully us out of elected positions that would make a difference in city council, county supervisor, and school boards. So this is near and dear to my heart, and believe me, I will stand up for our right to vote. It is the most precious right of all for us to cherish.
Can you read it one more time? I didn't hear the first part of the question.
Let's take a sec to turn on.
Yep.
So this one.
Okay. How important do you see voting by mail to be for voter turnout? What would be your initiative for voter mobilization?
Got it. Okay. I didn't hear the mail. Thank you. Guys, I think the bottom line is we want to make voting as easy as it can be. Mail, absentee, voting holiday, 2 days to vote, whatever facilitates our confreres in our community, our co-citizens to be able to have their voice heard. My son told me some years ago, this kid's so smart sometimes, or he thinks he is, Dad, you're going to be doing this political thing and running for office, but there's one thing you got to remember, and that is that those votes that you think you're going to get, you know, they're not things. They're people. And those people have real lives and real concerns, and that's what we want to hear. That's why it has to be easy for all of us to vote so that we can hear those voices and we can respect them. And that's what's going to make this all work for us. So sure, I think mail-in ballot and facilitating our students being able to express their vote is really important. If I had somebody who needed a ride to the ballot location, and I knew this person wasn't going to vote for me, I would be proud to drive them there. Thank you.
All right. So our next question is, and I'll hand you guys the card after this. Please address getting money out of politics. Money is not speech. Corporations, PACs, and unions are not people. And the order is Deb, Mark, and Brad.
Elections are about votes. Elections are about people, and elections are about trust. And when we look at getting money out of politics, believe me, I can tell you, I could probably speak for my colleagues as well. Boy, would we appreciate the fact that we could just get back to just the votes. One of the things that we need to do principally is end Citizens United, which was the biggest obstacle to putting money into the big PAC money into influence. And this went to the Supreme Court. So when we look at how electing a representative who is going to stand up for legislation to get big money out of Washington, look at who you can trust. I have been endorsed by Abigail Spanberger, a congresswoman who has already endorsed legislation to try to make Congress more financially responsible by making sure that people in Congress cannot trade stocks. That is one primary step, and then we need to move further. Congress needs to police itself in congressional elections, but then we need to work on federal legislation to overturn Citizens United, because this is the place where the money can be hidden. This isn't about $25 donations that can support a yard sign. This is about hundreds of thousands of dollars that is hidden. So that is, we principally need to make sure that you elect someone to Congress who is going to take a bold step to make sure that we make Congress accountable and our nation accountable, so that we get back to one person, one vote, and that's what matters.
Money in politics. Boy, I got it hard heavy, I should say, when I told that little story about wanting to learn how to be a politician. My first mentor, so to speak, was a man named Mike McCabe when he was running in a primary election here in 2018, one of the gubernatorial races. And I would stand out on the street corners holding these signs, money out, people in, money out, people in. Mike had devoted his life to that point in trying to figure out ways to remove the influence of money in Wisconsin politics. And that was where I cut my teeth in political experience. This influence of big money is so bad for us. 2 years ago, I ran a campaign, and one of the big concerns I kept bringing forward was the disparity of wealth. You know, when you have more and more money being concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, the issue with money is its power. And so we have more and more power being crushed or held into fewer and fewer hands. And when you have that power, what do you get? You get a big microphone, a really big one. And you can influence a lot of people's thinking in an unfair way. And we can correct this. We have legislation in our Congress to decrease this influence, and ultimately it would be wonderful if we could make politicking a public good, which it is. It is a public good, but as we could finance it as a public good, that would mean we would use our tax money to give it to our candidates so that they could do what they need to do, and that is to get the word out to us about who they are and what their ideas are, and to help us to talk about it so that in the end our vote will be counted. But even more than that, our vote is going to count because we've been able to prepare to do it. Thanks.
We need to get money out of politics. I think we all can agree on that. The Republican candidate for this office in the last quarter raised $900,000. That's 90 days. Raised $900,000. That's $10,000 a day. We should not allow someone with that kind of judgment and that kind of character buy this seat in Congress. We need to change campaign finance rules in this country. Citizens United was put in place in 2009. We need to move beyond that. But it's going to take legislation to do that. We need to strengthen our federal ethics rules that oversee our members of the Senate as well as the U.S. House of Representatives. I do not believe our federally elected officials should be buying and selling stock as they're serving in office and holding hearings in which you're calling people forward and they can learn information that you and I can't. There needs to be fundamental reform because the thing is this is built upon trust. It's built upon trust, and if we don't trust what's going on right now, it leads to frustration. It leads to cynicism. And that's not what we want. We need to change this system. We need to get this money out of politics.
All right. The next one, pretty straightforward. What is the first bill that you would propose? And we're just going to go straight down the line.
Well, so if I'm elected, or when I'm elected, we're supposed to say, I don't think I'm going to be proposing a bill as my first act. But I've already alluded to the fact that there are some great pieces of legislation in the Congress, and they're sitting there, and they need to be moved, and they need legislators who will do the work to get on board, to consult with their colleagues, and to keep doing the things that have to be done to get these pieces of legislation to go forward. Now, my favorite piece of legislation that's on those desks is a bill called H.R. 1976. It was introduced by Pramila Jayapal, Congresswoman from Washington. It was a W. And Pramila worked hard with her staff for 6 months to formulate this bill, and she consulted with all kinds of interest groups. And the one group that she didn't consult with were the people that we are struggling with so much in this country, and that is the private healthcare insurance companies. Because Pramila's bill is called Medicare for All 2021. And she describes a way that we will be able to finance ourselves so that everyone will have health care when they need it without the hassle. That's what we Americans want. And this is a piece of legislation. It's there. It has 121 supporters right now, and it needs to go forward. And that would be the bill that I would want most to contribute my efforts toward. Thank you.
I'd introduce legislation to protect Social Security. There is too many legislators in Washington, D.C. have thought that they can just walk away from Social Security. Well, that is something that's important. We've paid into that, and we need to make sure that we don't allow that to be privatized and taken away. That would impact too many people here in western Wisconsin, and too many people in this country. And that's something that we can't do. I would also introduce legislation to lower prescription drug costs. I think it's ridiculous how much it costs right now. I would definitely reintroduced the bill to cap insulin cost. I mean, this is something that people need every single day. My son has type 1 diabetes. He can't go without insulin. But the cost for a vial of insulin, it's ridiculous. And it's nothing but price gouging that's taking place. I would introduce that legislation. Of course, I'm going to work and make sure that we take care of this Mississippi River out here. This is really, really important, obviously, to the people of western Wisconsin. We got to make sure that we keep our air and water. We got to invest. I would continue to work on job creation. That's very important as well. But again, the first piece of legislation that I would introduce would be regards to protecting Social Security as we move forward.
Lowering drug prices. This affects every single person, every single family. And of course, in my own family, my mom and members of my family, it's every month there seems to be something else that's gone up a little bit, or there's a new medication that costs more and more and less is in your pocketbook. This is something that we can and must change. And I will be able to work across the aisle. I am someone that has been doing that all my life, and I will work with truth and reason to make sure that we go after the big pharma, that we can lower and we can negotiate Medicare prices, Medicare and Medicaid, to make sure that drug prices go down. We have to take an immediate step on this. There are so many problems. When we look at our Medicare issues, our insurance problems, we look at our environment, and we look at child care and our economy, there is so much that we need to do. But believe me, it's hard to pick just one, but I am going to make sure that I get drug prices down.
Thank you. Our next one is a little lighter. I like this question. And it's, who are your mentors, dead or alive? And go back down the line, starting with Deb.
Mentors, dead or alive? Well, I've spoken about two moms here, my father, who were great examples of service and resilience. As many of you know, because I'm right here in Menominee, that my brother Eric had cancer just at age 3. And we fought very hard. We did everything we could to keep him alive. And my father would take him to Madison to make sure that he got treatments, while Mom made sure that the rest of us were thriving at home as best we could. But there were other families that didn't have that kind of support like we had here. Losing a brother that young makes you understand how health care matters to people. Just a couple of years later, my brother was born with spina bifida. Others might have died, but our family made sure that we did everything we could to get him the care that he needed so that we, again, could all thrive. He's an amazing person. This is what families do, but families are being required so much more of health care, of senior care, of child care. So when I look at this community and what it's done to make sure that people can thrive, we in the federal government, that we can do better, that we can help people get senior care, people get child care, that we can lower drug prices, and that we can make sure that people have insurance that they can afford and that it's available everywhere. Because in Menominee at that time, there wasn't any of that here. Now it should be available in even the tiniest town to make it accessible through rural health care and through telehealth. So when I look at mentors, it was the families who kept us going when times got tough, and that's what families in Wisconsin do.
I agree. It's the family. My mom and dad provided every opportunity that they could. And they continue to encourage me, provide me with thoughts and ideas. They were the absolute best. I got involved and interested in public policy by just talking with my dad. We'd be out in the morning before school, before I had to go to school, and we'd be milking cows, and we'd have the radio on. We'd have the morning news on the radio, and I'd ask my dad all kinds of questions. And my dad would just spend the amount of time that he could in between feeding calves and just talking about the day's issues. And he said to me, he said, you know, Brad, you should think about something like this someday. You should just think about being involved in public policy. He didn't know what, but he encouraged me to be involved. And he was my best mentor. My mom's always there for me, through thick and thin. Through good times and bad, my mom is there. When I did something wrong, she reminded me I did something wrong. When I did something good, she'd give me a hug. And I absolutely love that. But I'll tell you, the greatest thing that ever happened in my life is I met my wife. That was the greatest thing that happened to me. She's all full of love. And she's so patient. And she's so giving. And she allows me to continue to explore, to continue to learn, to continue to beat my head against the wall, but to continue to say, keep going. That's the best love someone could give. So yes, it's the family. Family's the best mentor that I've had. Thank you.
It takes a second to kick in. Wow. So we're going to make it a threesome. Oh, excuse me. No, I mean, really, you know, when I think about what it is that influenced me as a person, it is definitely my family. But one thing I'd like to enlarge on also is the notion that when I practiced medicine in the hospital, people would say, well, who's family? And we would say, well, it's whoever the patient says is family. Because for all of us as human beings, that is what is so important to us, is those relationships that we experience as family members. And many of us have the opportunity to experience have that experience with our biological family members. And other times, we have other histories that mean that some people in our families were not necessarily biologically connected to me, but they've had that deep presence in my life that has made my ability to be a thriving person real. So, excuse me for starting the way I did, but the truth is I agree very much with my Kennedy colleagues of all that we've said. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, you're more than welcome to keep your mics on if you don't want to go through the whole double tap. Yeah. I'll give you an extra mic too. So this question is, for most families, college education comes with high debt burdens. The current policy options only help students manage the problem. What policies would you propose to reduce the costs of higher education? And we can start with Mark, and I'll this question.
Pay for it. I mean, pay for it from public funding. All the investment that we make as a community into the education of our young people, from the moment they're born until any time in life, but a lot of times it's getting through high school and college. These are not things that we are giving to individuals to hold as their own. These opportunities for healthy development in education and expansion of our personhood and our intelligence, these are goods for the community. Because when we prepare students to become young adults and to have a career that they're interested in, it's not a thing for them, it's a thing for all of us. A doctor trained is not for the doctor individual, but to have well-trained physicians in our community. So I am very, very adamant that from the moment of our first breath, all through our developmental and educational experiences, there should be public support for the full development, whether that be developmental, psychosocial, or educational, scholastic. And a student graduating from university or graduate school needs to pay forward what they've learned. It's not an issue of paying back to some investor. We're paying forward to the benefit of those who will follow. Thanks.
Well, as I mentioned before, college is too expensive. We need to do better when it comes to accessibility and affordability when it comes to education. It costs too much money to get a degree. We can do better. But we need to stop talking, and we need to start doing. What's going on right now in Madison in the state legislature is the GOP down there has been underfunding this for years. I'm proud to have stood with Governor Tony Evers as we've tried to put more money into education. May it be K through 12, technical, or the four-year university system. We've done our best to try and put more money into this system. But the thing is, it's not enough. More needs to be done. We need to work to make sure that we have apprenticeship programs and mentorship programs as well. So when students graduate, there's a career there for them. We need to continue to work to make sure that we have dual enrollment programs with our high school getting into college. That's important. We need to make sure that regardless of where someone may live in this state, may it be in a rural area or an urban area, that they have an opportunity within our education system. That needs to be our priority. Those are my priorities, and I will continue to advocate for those. Thank you.
I was lucky to grow up in a family where they said the best crop was kids. And that's how they felt about opportunity. And whether it be vocational, trade school, college, there was just go on, find your passion, do what you're born to do, find where you're supposed to fit to serve, because everybody serves. We need to make sure that every single student has the best quality education in every zip code, and that this is not just a state and local problem, that this is a federal issue, because America depends on this. The innovation, the sustainability, and everything about our nation depends on the future of our students now. And we have crippled them with loans or the inability to be able to get into a trade because they can't get child care, they can't go to work and also get the training. So work-study programs that we've talked about for many years would be a great start so that we can get people from high school into voc, trade, college, and that they can then also cap those high loans. Loan forgiveness is being done, hopefully, as we speak, and that we make sure that people can get child care, because it's not, those are some families who can go into continuing education. So this can be a game changer for us, and our whole country depends on it.
Thank you. The next question from the audience is, what are your thoughts on cannabis legalization, both medically and recreationally? And we're going to do Brad, Mark, then Deb for this.
Yes. I have sponsored legislation, co-sponsored legislation, and the state legislature does just that. Both medical as well as recreational. I think it's long past time. So my answer is I agree. Let's get this done. We know what our neighboring states, Minnesota, Michigan, and Illinois. I don't understand why Wisconsin has to be an island when it comes to this issue. Thank you.
Definitely that we should decriminalize and deschedule cannabis. You know, I'm not a historian, but 100 years ago, people would smoke hemp just because it was there. Somewhere around the 60s, somebody thought it would be a good idea to engage in this war on drugs. And as I've tried to understand it a little bit, or actually a lot, I realized that it was a way to divide us and to really, it was in many ways there was an aspect of racism involved because, I mean, the people who like to beatniks and jazz, you know, they like to smoke. And if we can if we can make this illegal, it's going to be, you know, hard on them. And gosh, this whole thing about the war on drugs has been a big failure because when one of us or any of us gets engaged with substance abuse and we call it a crime instead of recognizing it as a disease, we're missing and we're causing more harm and cruelty. The war on drugs has been a failure. Legalizing marijuana would be one step of moving in the direction of correcting that failed policy and allowing us to treat one another as we are, in need of care and not of spending time incarcerated and destroying our families because we have to be there for this issue. Thank you.
Trifecta, that I absolutely support the decriminalization of cannabis for medical reasons and recreational reasons. And I primarily, of course, because we do need to give everyone any possibility of support for pain or for with glaucoma and the many other ways that cannabis can support people medically. And we do need to decriminalize this so that when we look at our prison populations and the outside, the number of people who are criminalized for this are proportionately more black and brown. And so we need to be able to look at this as an economic issue as well. And I believe that we can take the money that with the tax from this, if it's akin to liquor and tobacco, the money can go back into healthcare where we need it most.
Thank you. So our next question is, how do you plan to address LGBTQIA plus issues in the community and recent attacks on transgender people? And we'll start with Deb, then Mark, then Brad, and let me bring this over.
You can see I'm happy about this question. So, I will absolutely be a champion for LGBTQIA issues in our community federally. This is a human right, and there is no place for the government in who we love, and also in terms of health care. So my own family, I'm proud to say that my husband and I are parents of a son who is gay and a stepdaughter, my husband's daughter, who is also gay, married to another woman and has a baby. This is not just personal to us, this is international to us. We have worked overseas. People can be stoned or even killed if they are gay. And this has been a discriminatory issue for us too long in this country. And this is a right that we thought that we had ensured. And we are backsliding here. Especially in this race, the stakes of this are high. We are about to lose our way of life, the very democratic values, such as LGBTQIA health and the ability to live freely. So I will absolutely be a champion.
I have a friend who is trans, and she was explaining to me a plan that she and her friend have, that if a certain element of potential electeds would happen to come in office, they knew how they were going to leave our country. And that is very, very, very incriminating in a moral sense to us all, that we have American citizens who fear that we can create laws or attitudes on a governmental level that would cause them to make plans for how they will escape their experience of their heritage, where they were born, their citizenship. Definitely, we have to recognize, for all issues of justice, the fundamental principle of the honor of the dignity of all of us. That dignity, which means our right, having been born, it's our birthright. It is our right, because of our birth, into this humanity, to thrive. When my mother or your mother or all of us, when that child drew its first breath, what was the thought? Oh, my child's going to be sick. My child's not going to thrive. Those parents ached for the possibility that that child would be able to thrive and experience the fullness of life, however they are. And that's what we, as a government, as a governed people, want to preserve in our fashion of governing. Thank you.
Respect. Treat people fairly. That's fundamental of who we are. It's fundamental of who I am. We have a Republican candidate for Congress in this district who thinks it's okay to march into a public library in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin in June of 2021 during Gay Pride Month and to verbally harass a teenage librarian aide because he didn't like the books on display about that given topic. That's a far cry from respect. That's bullying. That's harassment. That is wrong. That's not who we are. We can do better. All I can say is that I respect people. And I think that's the Western Wisconsin way.
Thank you. Just another reminder, sorry, no attacking candidates who are not present, just so we can talk strictly about our policies and our opinions. And our next question is, what do you think are reasonable ways to address hate crimes done to our communities of color in Wisconsin? And we'll start off with Mark.
Guys, this is a hard question, because when these horrible events that we learn about happen, it anguishes our souls to the very depth. And our desire, or at least my desire, is to get revenge. I mean, there's part of me that says that evil needs to be hurt back, to respond in that way. But I'm afraid that I'm not getting there by allowing that urge in my part. We're going to punish anybody who does something like that. I have to ask, what is it that even sets up the possibility for that kind of action that we call hate crime? You know, all the horrible experience our country's had with, for one example of lynching, the African Americans living in the United States of America after the Civil War. You know, it's hundreds and thousands of people died in that fashion, and you stop for a minute and imagine what was going on in those people's minds. How can I get at that problem? That's where I struggle. And that's why I say it's not an easy answer, but it's where I want to go when I'm trying to understand how to undo the risk of our co-citizens acting to one another in these ways.
Everyone deserves equal protection under the law. That's what the Constitution states. And that's what I believe. I will also say this. Everyone has a right to peaceful protest. I think that's important to be said. And again, even if you disagree with someone, you got to recognize the fact that it's equal protection under the law, and everyone has a right to a peaceful protest. I think that's important. I think we need to remember that. But I will also say this, is that we need to recognize the fact that our public safety officers, our police officers, they live in our community as well, and they work hard. We need to continue to invest in community policing. We need to make sure we keep our community safe. I think that's important. So I think that we need to recognize the fact that we got to get back to the basics. The equal protection under law. We respect people's opportunity to protest, their right to protest, even if we disagree with them. I think that's important. And we need to recognize the fact that we all live in the same community. And so, while we may not agree with everything that someone says, we don't have to be so disagreeable. Thank you.
There's no mistaking that people of color have been marginalized and discriminated against for too long, and that hate crimes against them have been hurting, that our nation has been grappling with this for over 100 years, and that we need to ensure that we teach it, that public schools, that we're able to ensure that children are safe in their schools and that we are safe in our communities. And that these are state and local issues, but that we need to take a federal stance on this. And we need to ensure that our legislation for hate crimes, and even if it is hate speech, as what we've been seeing a lot of on the internet, because it's not just in our streets. It is now so pervasive that our children see it on their computers. And so we need to take bold stands to protect speech, protect our ability to organize and express ourselves, but that people are protected from this kind of control. We also need to make sure that we are fully funding mental health. When we look at hate and its causes and its effects, we need to make sure that we are helping people gain access to something that can make this better, and that we can have mental health counselors, because we don't have enough in the 3rd District. We're drastically underserved in this, and I believe even we should be able to have national certifications so that you don't have to just be in Minnesota or Wisconsin or Illinois, that you could go cross states on this. But we need to make sure that we are giving all that we can to communities, and that we are fully funding our first responders to make sure that they can de-escalate these situations and that we can take care of these people involved.
Great, thank you all. The next one, what can you do to reduce subsidies to fossil fuels and increase them for solar, wind, geothermal, electric vehicle charging stations, etc.? And we're going to do Deb, Brad, Mark, so Deb this way.
We need to invest in these technologies, and this is what makes the 3rd District an amazing model and pilot for other places in our nation. In public, private, and academic partnerships, and we have got some great examples right here in Chippewa Valley, that where every single bit of the farm that I know is that they're reducing their carbon footprint, being able to work so that their farms containers can go straight out to the fields and not have to be brought into central areas, so that they can be taken straight up to waterways and reduce the supply chain glutton that we have. And we absolutely need to be able to rotate in solar power right here in this part of western Wisconsin, and wind in the lower parts. And we need to be able to invest in clean energy jobs, that this will bring so many jobs to western Wisconsin and reduce our fossil fuels. So there's a lot that we can do, and we have. We led the way in conservation 100 years ago, and we can again.
Well, if you want to know what climate change means to me, you just have to know my constituents along the Kickapoo River, which has flooded 4 times in the last 12 years, impacting small communities in Monroe and Vernon County and Crawford County, as well as the family farmers who live near that Kickapoo River. We have to invest when it comes to climate change. We need to make sure when we do that, that the people here in west central Wisconsin are part of this solution. We need to make sure that our family farmers continue to have the incentives in order for carbon sequestration. We need to make sure that we have cover crops that are available for our family farmers so they can work in order to hold in that carbon, keep that soil intact. We don't have the erosion and the runoff that takes place. We need to continue to invest in our manufacturing sector and rebuild our manufacturing sector to make sure that we can meet the needs of our consumers that are out there. We need to make sure that we're all part of the solution. And I am proud to say that here in western Wisconsin, we take this serious. We will continue to be part of the solution. And we're going to continue to move forward to make sure that we tackle this very serious problem.
So how do we reduce subsidies to fossil fuels and increase them for solar and other green energy sources? That question reminds me of what do I do to stop being addicted? And, you know, one definition of addiction is you're doing something even though you know it's hurting yourself and you keep doing it. And that's the way I see us as a society. We're stuck on this fossil fuel, and we know that we have to stop using it because we're choking on it in this planet. The carbon dioxide's just, you know, choking us. And how do we get off of it? Well, if I'm going into treatment, for somebody to tell me, stop, I'm not going to succeed. I have to see something better. Something that says, you know, I really don't want to hang on to that substance anymore because I see something better that I want to go to, that I want to live. You know, for me, it was my wife. Okay, I smoked cigarettes. I was a doctor. I smoked cigarettes. I was addicted. But man, once I met that lady, I said, if she ever smells cigarette smoke on me, I will be cooked. So I never smoked again. But that's what we need. We need another offering when it comes to our addiction. And that's where exploiting, developing, making better sources of energy is really, really important. And that's what the federal government can do, because we can do big projects. We can promote the exploration of new technologies. And I like to say, even though it's a little risky when I talk to my progressive friends, that we really do need to get into fission power as a source of energy, because as human beings, we've always improved our status in life by the use of energy. Thank you.
Those are some great answers. Thank you. So our next question is, please list what you believe are the top 3 problems in America, must address either national or international. And this is a 2-parter. And of these 3 problems, which one do you believe has the best chance of being resolved? And what will you do to help fix it? It's a big question. And we'll start off with Mark, then go on to Brad and Deb. Thank you.
All right, practice that. The 3 big problems. the first thing that comes to mind for me is the emergency that we call climate emergency. And I think that 100 years from now, people will look back at our generation and ask, what did we do? I know that now we like to look back at the middle of the 20th century and say, well, what did my parents do? Tom Brokaw called them the Great Generation. Are there going to be people in 80, 100 years from now who look back at our generation and say, we were a great generation when we faced the reality and the threats and the undermining of the national security of our planet because of all of the migrations that are going to be caused and the multitude of problems that we all learn about and know about? For me, that is the big problem in front of us. I would say the second problem is this cancer that I think we've talked about this evening that doesn't allow us to recognize who we are as human beings and the heritage that we've received and that we want to transmit it on, but to really dig into that reality and to hold on to it and to promise it to those who will follow. And, well, the third one is my favorite one, and that is let's solve the healthcare financing problem that we have to live with. Our current healthcare financing system is cruel, it's ineffective, it's inefficient, and it's fixable. And we just have to do it. We have to have the political will to say no to the profiteers, and that's once again why we have a federal government, because the federal government has that power to break a monopoly like we did 120 years ago during the Gilded Age with Teddy Roosevelt and so on. We have that power as a federal government to say stop to the profiteers.
Well, thank you for that question. I'll say number one, it's the lack of civil discourse. We just don't talk with one another anymore. You know, we can disagree with one another, but we don't have to be so disagreeable. But right now, we have a situation where the thing is that everything is a food fight. Everything's a political food fight. And that is just so unfortunate. Because the second thing is this. We need to come together. I mean, we're strong when we come together. We can respect our differences, but the thing is this, we got a common belief in who we are. As people here in Western Wisconsin, as people here in this country, it's a common belief. You know, that's important. We can respect each other's differences, but have that sense of unity. And the third thing is we need to move beyond this politics of resentment. I resent someone else because they have more than me. That's not what any of us really believe. I was taught to, get up and try. Do your very best. That's what this is all about. But instead, we have this idea now that someone's not getting ahead because someone else. Well, that's not it. So the fourth thing is we need to change this system. A system right now that is not investing in the people here in rural America. We have a system right now that's not investing in the people here in rural America. May it be on healthcare, may it be on economics, may it be on education, may it be on transportation. We can do better. Thank you.
As I said before, drug prices and, of course, our health care, but our immediate problem is that we need to get drug prices lowered. That is affecting every single family in our nation. Second, our economy. Families are struggling with terrible inflation. And, of course, right here, farms, for their inputs, to keep them sustainable and innovative, and our businesses, we need to give them immediate help. And we can do that federally. And of course, our environment. We need to create standards so that not every state can just make up their lowest standards. And we need to work with our allies, because it's not just about America. This is a worldwide problem. So when we look at this, these are hard problems, or they would not have been, or they'd have been fixed already. When my dad went to Congress, he said, Deb, there's it's not like the state legislature where everybody came in and went out same door. There were two cloakrooms, Republican cloakroom, Democratic cloakroom. Everybody stayed one side or the other. But not my dad. He opened up the Republican cloakroom, Democrat. He walked through the Republican cloakroom door, and they were a little surprised, and he kept putting out his hand. Hey, Marvin. Hi, Barb. And he did this every other day. And on Fridays, there was ecumenical prayer breakfast because he said they had good eggs. But honestly, it was about being able to connect with people where they were. It was a lesson to me. He said, and if there was a particularly difficult piece of legislation, he smoked in those days, right, Dad? But he'd walk right up and say, Marv, do you have a light? Because it is about walking and working across the aisle. I have been doing this for 25 years, and when we look at these tough problems, we need someone who is going to go boldly to make sure that these get done, because we have been talking about them for too long.
Thank you again. So unfortunately, this will be our last question. We do have so many amazing questions, but we weren't able to get to all of them. So thank you for writing them in. In Wisconsin, we see a large divide between rural and urban communities. How will you work to amend this divide socially and economically? And we'll start off with Brad, go to Deb, and then Mark.
You got to meet people where they're at. I've done that my entire career. You have to meet people where they're at. May they be in a rural area or may they be in an urban area. My mom taught me something early in life. She said, Brad, you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen twice as much as you speak. And I think that's good advice. Because the thing is this, is that people want opportunity. Someone asked me once, Brad, why are you a Democrat? And I'm a Democrat because of this. I believe in opportunity. I believe in fairness. And I believe in community. And I don't think that that's just a Democratic thing. I think that's what the people here in Wisconsin believe. That's how I approach my day every single day. That's how I approach my job right now. And that's how I'll approach as a member of Congress. Reaching out, learning from people, recognizing that they've got their thoughts and their ideas, but then asking in return that they take the time to listen and to learn about what's happening in this congressional district and recognizing we're all in this together. Thank you.
Well, we talked a lot about the rural-urban divide, and my colleague brought up the book, The Politics of Resentment, which I read twice cover to cover because it really did talk about how people felt left behind. Even if they had received the same amount of benefits that someone in the city had received, they still felt that it was less because it was less, there were fewer people. And we talk about something that can make such a difference. For instance, people will call it broadband, let's call it high-speed internet, making sure that it gets out to every single premises, every single farm, every single business. One thing that has been almost, it should be like electricity, and yet it's become a discriminatory or an economic factor in our lives. This is something that kids deserve to be able to do their homework at home and not in the Quick Trip parking lot. When we take a look at things like rural telehealth and rural health care, and where we can try to make an immediate difference for people in rural areas to show them that we care, we can help this through federal programs. And we can help farms have a high return on investment and to make sure that we've solved the supply chain issues so they can get their product to market. That is respect. That is showing them that they matter to us. Making immediate changes, helping with child care. For 85 spots in a county, there's 100 families who want child care. And it can cost up to 35% of their income to have it. We can't get people out to work. And let's talk about protecting women's rights and voting rights. These are some of the things that we haven't been talking about enough, and we need to make sure that people in rural areas know, and that we take care of their schools. So I grew up learning to listen. It was one of the treasures that I could rely on, but that is what I will take to Congress. I'm going to get it done.
So I try to imagine living in the rural area 50, 100 years ago, the rich heritage that was thriving in western Wisconsin and all throughout Wisconsin. And the grandparents who gave just a robust life to their families with a 60-head dairy operation. And now, a few generations later, the current farmers, they look back and say, why can't I do it like Granddad did? Why is it just not working for us anymore? Something is broken. So that experience in the rural area is weighing upon the folks who live there. And what happens, the big operations come in, and then the smaller ones, we're losing them. You know, I can't remember the exact statistics, but you all know it's horrendous. The number of dairy herds that are lost every day on the average in this country. And when you have people living in that situation, of course they're going to say, there's something broken here. And I believe that the thing was broken was illustrated when Sonny Perdue said in 2019, I guess, he was in Madison at the World Dairy Fair, and he said, get big or get out. And what he was saying is that our government supports corporations. We don't support little people. And because there's not going to be little people, then there's not going to be little villages, and there's not going to be little health facilities, and there's not going to be little churches, because big corporations, these CAFOs, they don't need that stuff. In fact, they don't want you there because they would rather just go ahead and pollute the land. So that's where I see the problem is, and our government needs to change its attitude and say, we're going to support the little people and turn away from the idea that Sonny Perdue, our former Secretary of Agriculture, proposed. Thank you.
All right, since that was our final question, we want to thank all of our candidates for being here. Before we go into 5-minute closing statements, I also want to thank the audience for all of your amazing questions. As well as the League of Women Voters, our wonderful professors. I know a lot of you are here tonight because you got extra credit, so thank you to our professors for doing that.
I hope you all get A's.
And again, thank you to our candidates for coming to our little school. It really means a lot that you're here at Stout. And I think since we went this way for introductions, we want to come back this way for conclusions.
The stakes of this, got so excited. The stakes of this election are high for our democracy and for our way of life. Too many people have been looking at this election in fear, but that's not who we are. We are resilient and we are strong. We feed and equip the nation. So goes Wisconsin, so goes the United States. And we stand up. The stakes of this election are high. We'll have to make a decision about whether you want someone who's took an oath of office to respect and defend our Constitution and to stand up for our electoral systems, stand up for our rights, stand up for our families, stand up for our economy. I am a wife and mother. I will never stop fighting for Wisconsin. I've served abroad in many places in our hardship and conflict zones, and I can tell you, the one thing, when you hear shrapnel coming past you, or you hear the duck and cover sound, is that you want to be home. You want to be right here in the Red Cedar Trail. You want to be walking on Main Street and going into Marion's for a chocolate again. And there's nothing like coming home. That is why I will never stop fighting to defend this district and you. When we look at my colleagues, and I respect them greatly, you can see we're not far apart on the issues, and we're friends. We text each other. But this election is about something very big. And we appreciate tonight the chance that we could talk about our backgrounds. I will speak boldly. I will never quit working, fighting for you. I'm Deb McGrath. I'm running for Congress, and I hope you'll sign nomination papers and look at my website at debmcgrathforcongress.com. Thank you. It's great to be at home with you.
Well, great job, Deb. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, UW Stout. This was fun. This is the way it's supposed to be. This is democracy at work. You know, we need to do this more often, where we can listen and we can learn from one another. And unfortunately, we've gotten away from that in this country. But I say thank you for bringing it back, just at least for a little night here, or for a little bit tonight. This was fun. So I'm Brad Paff. I've had the opportunity to work for the people here in western Wisconsin most of my adult life. I served as our state Secretary of Agriculture for a period of time, and I stood up for our family farmers and our rural residents. I've had the opportunity to serve in the Wisconsin State Legislature, where I work tirelessly in order to make sure that the people in western Wisconsin have their voices heard. And I'm asking for your support for Congress, because I think you know what we need to do. We need to get back to the basics. We need to invest in our people and our communities. We need to give our children and our grandchildren opportunities to succeed. We need to make sure our main streets continue to have vibrant small businesses. We need to give our working families a raise. They need to be part of the economic solution. We need to find new markets for the farm goods that come from our farm fields. And we need to recognize how important our family farmers are to the character and the culture and the heritage of our state. But in order for any of that to happen, we have to change a system. A system that for too long is looked down upon, is ignored, or quite frankly, thinks that we out here are not sophisticated enough to understand what's going on. Well, you know what? We do. We need to change this. We need to stand up. We need to make sure that this area of the state, this part of the country, gets its fair share. Because you see, it doesn't matter if you drive a truck or if you're out in the field right now driving a tractor, or if you work at the Quick Trip just up the road, or if you're a teacher or you're a nurse, you're a police officer or a firefighter. We're all in this together. This is West Central Wisconsin. Through good times and bad, through opportunities and through challenges, we come together. We get knocked down, we stand on up. And you know, if anyone wants to know why I'm running for Congress, well, that's it. It's the fact that who we are and the fact that this part of the country, we deserve our fair share. Because that's rural America. That's west central Wisconsin. And if you ask me, this is the best part of America. I ask you to join me in this race for Congress. You can go to www.bradpath.com. You can also sign my nomination signatures that are just outside the door. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. It was a great honor. Thank you.
When I mentioned earlier that I have the privilege of serving on the City of La Crosse Common Council. And so an issue is before us on the council, and I know that there's some people that are going to like the vote to go one way, and there's some people in the audience and maybe on the council who are going to want the vote to go the other way. And in the end, we're going to vote, and there's going to be a step forward. And I sit there and I think, can I put some words together that might be helpful? And you know, I know I only get to say something for just a minute or so. And can I put some words together that are somehow going to be helpful for all of us in this community in La Crosse to go forward from this decision, that those who disagree are going to be okay, and those that do, that like it, don't toot their horn too loud. So I'm struggling with that. And I think that's what we got to do tonight, that I appreciate so much that you invited us to come, is that you help us, the candidates, to learn how we can put the words together to ask you if we will serve you or represent you. But we are learning a skill, and that is how to feel the vibrancy in our community. And so when you come here, we make democracy happen together, and that is what is so thrilling to me, because the alternative is I go home and I look at a Facebook page, or, you know, maybe a Twitter feed. Oh my God. And you say, is that where it's at? It really is here, person to person, interacting. And if I could offer one more thought, when we leave tonight, don't let it stop here. Today, when I was circulating door to door in one of our neighborhoods here in Menominee, I had some wonderful conversations with people who might be identified as Republican, and some might be identified as Democrat, or maybe somewhere in the middle. But in the end, the one that was most disturbing was the fellow who said, you know what, I don't do politics. And, you know, he's like, thanks for coming, but I don't do politics. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what we have to do. And we have to be comfortable enough with one another in our common conversations to learn how to help each other in our society, to believe in one another, that we really do have the ability to govern ourselves. And so my feeling now is wholeheartedly one of gratitude to these guys and to all of us. So thank you.
All right, let's give another round of applause to all of our wonderful candidates. Again, I want to thank you all so much for being here today, and I just want to say, this is how many unasked questions we have. This is democracy right here. Yeah, exactly. I believe the next election for our area is August 11th. It's preliminary. We've also got 2 other candidates up for this position. And if you guys want to figure out how to vote, ask your professors, ask your candidates, or go to myvote.we.org. That's WI.org. You can get registered to vote right there. Again, ask the league, ask your professors, ask your parent, ask your friend in class, and please vote. It's important.